Hi everybody, it's Louise here with my 144 topics, and this week I'm talking about nutrition for stress. So you'll have to excuse me because I'll have some notes here because there's lots of stuff to remember. So last week I was talking about stress, how can it affect us and how does it affect us. So we've gone through that. So this week I just want to keep this practical. I just really want to talk about foods that you can actually incorporate to actually help in times of stress. So ideally we want to be having a low stress diet, which basically really means that we basically cut out as much preservatives as we can, as much processed foods, as much hydrogenated fats, as much chemicals, and really try and go for as much whole food as we can. So, you know, that would be a high stress diet, eating a lot of processed food. So a low stress diet is going to be eating as much whole foods as possible. So the more foods that are real foods, that look like foods, that are picked from the garden, or, you know, that we're actually getting fresh foods that aren't in a packet, that don't have a barcode on them, will be the thing to do. And the aim for that is the nutrient levels are a lot higher. So once we start processing foods, we start to actually take out a lot of the nutrients. So even through the milling process of making, you know, whole grains into white bread, we can take up to 80% of some of the B vitamins in that. So going for fresh foods, the enzyme activity in fresh foods is also really high as well. So you're getting all the enzyme activity. So if you're finding that you're eating food and you're finding that you're actually having a meal and then you're feeling sleepy afterwards, that's a good indication that you're not got enough enzymes in your system and you want to be having some more enzymatic activity happening there. So fresh whole foods is a great way to do that. Foods are very good for that are papaya pawpaw. Daikon radish is also very high in that, and of course pineapple, and it's the middle part of the pineapple, it's the core of the pineapple, but that has all the juicy bits, the bit that we normally chuck away. So I'm going to go through some nutrients, and we're going to talk about the three phases of stress. So the first phase of stress response basically is when we go into a fight or flight, so we get something happens, we're in a stressful situation, and the nutrients that we want to be having in that is mostly B5, and then also your vitamin C, A, E, and also your essential fatty acids. Now, ideally in a good situation, the stress response is then goes away, or we feel better, the adrenaline and the cortisol sort of just seeps out of our system and we sort of go back to normal. But if we're having continued stress, we're in stressful situations where we continue to have that, and some of that can be exposure to what we're having and what we're putting in our body, and I'm going to go through those more in other recordings. But if the stress remains there, then things will start to change. The nutrients we want to be having there is good sources of proteins, zinc, B5, B2, B6, your B vitamins, and some good green leafy veg, like ideally good green leafy veg. Then, you know, the stress remains, then we can end up going, if the stress is continued, we'll get to the point where we can become exhausted. And once we become exhausted, then really what we want to be having is basically all our nutrients. So we need a broad spectrum of our B vitamins, we need our fat-soluble ones, A, E, D, K, and then we ideally want to be getting all our minerals. So having a broad spectrum of minerals is going to be really good. So before I start going through the nutrients, because I'm just going to read through some of the nutrients and give you some foods, because I want this to be as practical as possible. I've done a recording of this, which is 23 minutes, but I want to keep this short and sweet. So foods that we can probably avoid if we're stressed will be stimulants. So stimulants will be caffeine, sugar, alcohol would probably be the major offenders there. You know, junk food, as I've mentioned before, and then people can have issues with intolerances and sensitivities, all of which are very easily treatable. Happy to help you and guide you through that process. So there might be some gut repair that's needed. You might need to look at increasing and toning the situation and changing what you're eating so you're not going into a stress response. So when we become stressed, we do want to gravitate to sugars and simple carbs. So simple carbs, the difference between simple and complex carbs, an example would be simple carbs would be white bread, white pasta, but more complex carbs would be whole grain breads, whole grain pastas. So there's more fibre in them basically. So more fibre, more nutrients, more food to actually feed the gut and the digestive system, but let's not get lost in the gut. So let's look at some foods that we can actually go to eat. And I'm sorry about the paper, but there's just way too many foods here to remember for all the nutrients. So the first one is going to be your essential fatty acids. So there's a high need for essential fatty acids really through all aspects of stress response. When there's any allergies, when there's any inflammation, oils are very essential, and we want to be getting away from the hydrogenated foods, the margarine that cockroaches don't even want to eat, so don't eat it. Ideally best for your health if you don't eat it, sorry, correct myself. And get more into good sources of oil, so hemp oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, and butter, ghee. Those sort of oils will be far preferable in my eyes than anything else. Now you'll also find these good oils in fish, but depending on whether you're vegan or not, I'll give you both options. Salmon I wouldn't recommend because of the farming, the fed soy, blah blah blah. But things like tuna, things like anchovies, things like mackerel. Sorry, not tuna. I wouldn't recommend tuna. Tuna is a larger fish. It's a deep sea fish, more prone to heavy metals. So sardines, anchovies, mackerel, whitebait. So fish like that I would probably recommend. Always making sure that you're having wild caught fish, not farm fish, would be ideal. Though if you are vegan or vegetarian, then you might want to have things like chia seeds, flax seeds. So flax oil is really important, walnuts, so and pumpkin seeds. So ideally you want to be having them on a daily basis to make sure that you're nourishing the nervous system. Every single cell in the body needs oils. We're surrounded by oils, so forget the whole cholesterol thing. You want to be substituting, getting rid of the not so good oils and having healthier options. So we'll go through the nutrients. We'll start with vitamin C. So here you want to ideally be having fresh food. So vitamin C will start to decompose within 20 minutes. So food's being put under fluoro lights or food's being in storage. The longer it's in storage, the longer it's exposed to fluoro lights, the quicker it reduces. So fresh food, have a lemon tree somewhere, get hold of anything. So red peppers, capsicum, dark leafy grey, veg, cabbage, spinach, papayas, strawberries, sweet peppers, red cabbage, lemons, mangoes, raspberries, honeydew melons, tomatoes. So you're getting the gist, okay? And ideally they want to be fresh. The next nutrient I'm going to look at, the vitamin C converts basically, vitamin C helps create serotonin. I call that the happy hormone. I like to keep this very simple. It can get very complex, so just keep it simple. So, you know, having those foods is going to increase the happy hormones. So zinc is a neurotransmitter. It's used for immune, it's used for skin, it's used for reproduction. It's got many, many, many functions, very important. Here in Australia, we've got quite zinc deficient soils. So add some seaweed to your soils is a great way to increase that, and also add seaweed to yourself. So one of the better sources of zinc is oysters, not great for vegans though. So ginger root, split peas, almonds, turkey, green peas, shrimps, thyme, cinnamon would be some examples that I would use there for zinc. Tryptophan. Tryptophan is your precursor to your serotonin happy hormones. Very good for depression, for helping to overcome depression and insomnia, and very good for stabilizing moods. So foods there, highest ones would be turkey and cottage cheese. Then I would go for things like potatoes, lentils, brown rice, almonds. So having the complex carbs there will help increase the absorption that you're having of the tryptophan. So again, the whole grains, another more reason to use the complex carbs. Tyrosine, that's your precursor to norephedrine, which is basically your adrenaline, also connected to the thyroid and mood disorders. So sources here would be spinach, almonds, corn, chicken, fish and legumes would be good sources of that. So glutamine is basically a neurotransmitter that has a very calming effect on the body. So very much linked, low levels of that is linked to anxiety. Here, good sources is protein sources. So again, it's going to be fish and meats, nuts, seeds, avocado, but something that's also high in is oats. And in the herbal world, oats is the organ remedy or the great remedy for helping with nourishing and toning the nervous system. So having your porridge in the morning with some berries, and some yogurt, maybe some seeds put on there. A very good way to just nourish that nervous system. Magnesium. Magnesium's a must. So magnesium relaxes, calcium contracts. So we want to relax. Most cardiovascular disorders, there's an issue usually of magnesium deficiency. So lots on this list here. So almonds, millet, pecans, walnuts, beet greens, spinach, lots of dark green leafies. So the dark, the chards, the spinach, the silver beet, the kales, very high in magnesium, but they want to be having that dark green colour. So, get rid of the iceberg lettuce. You want stuff with colour. Mushrooms, pineapple, cabbages, grapes, asparagus, turkey, oranges, onions, plums, apples, lots of sources there. So again, if you're eating the whole foods, you're getting all those nutrients. Folate is your B9, very much, again, part of that synthesis of creating the happy hormones. It's a cofactor that's needed in that process of going from tryptophan to type 5-HTP to serotonin. So, good sources, dark green leafy veg, again, lentils and beans. I was going to combine the two, and then yeast. So yeast is a great source of all your B vitamins, whether it's Tarula's yeast, brewer's yeast. In the raw food making world, yeast are often used to make raw cheeses and things like that. B12 deficiency basically makes the nervous system degenerate and break down, so it's really important that you've got B12. You want to be having healthy gut function for that as well, which is really important, so making sure that you're eating more of the whole foods, the good soluble fibres to help that. You've got your probiotics. We'll save that for another discussion on the gut. Good sources here, brains, clams, egg yolks, herrings, kidney, liver, oysters, salmon and sardines, and mushrooms. So B3 here, B3 is very much connected to memory loss, to mood swings, depression, anxiety, if there's a deficiency there in your Bs. It's also another cofactor in making your happy hormones here. Good sources are almonds, chicken, eggs, legumes, mackerel, peanuts, sunflower seeds, and the yeast. B6 here is very good for cognitive activity and brain function, so very good for energy, healthy appetite and things like that. Legumes, nuts, whole grains and the yeast. Now B5 is known as your anti-stress vitamin. It's really important for helping your adrenal function and for immune system and for the neurotransmitter pathway. So the neurotransmitters are making messages jump from one nerve cell to the next cell, so we want to keep that flowing. Good sources here are beef, brewer's yeast, eggs, green vegetables, legumes, mushrooms, royal jelly, saltwater fish, yeast again, avocado and sweet potato. So there's some inositol is connected to the B vitamins, very good for depression, panic attacks and obsessive compulsive disorders. Sources here are beans, corn, organ meats and seeds. Again, we need healthy gut for this to actually be functioning and working very well. Choline is the next one. Choline is very much connected to for optimal memory. So we've got egg yolks, lecithin, beans, peanuts, yeast and fish. Then we have phenylalanine. Phenylalanine is a very good nutrient has a very strong antidepressant activity. So good sources here are a lot of meats, primarily pork, beef, lamb, turkey, trout, though the best ones for vegans would be cabbage and spinach. And then potassium is your nerve impulse. It's very much helping that firing from the nerves and getting the messages across there. So bananas, oats, avocado, tuna are good sources there. And selenium as well, very good for lifting depression, anxiety. So good sources there are brewer's yeast, Brazil nuts is one of the highest, garlic, sunflower seeds, oysters, broccoli and onions. So you can see from that list that what's coming up there is a lot of whole food, so it's actually having a lot of whole foods. There are other options, whether you're vegan or vegetarian and don't eat meat. The avocados, the dark green leafy veg, the berries, try and get as much colours into you as you can. Aim to eat a rainbow diet and know that it's very easy for you to gravitate towards wanting to have sugars or alcohol or caffeine or something like that when we're stressed and we want that lift. though it's always a short-lived lift, and it will give us that stress response where we're like woohoo and we feel pretty great, but with that can often come a bit of a crash. So aim for some more substantial foods. More whole foods is always great. I'm going to do further discussions about the gut and healing, and there will be more stuff. So thanks for sharing. Louise here, spiritual educator, sharing the news and seeing you always in health and always in happiness. Bless. Bye. Hi everybody.